Hello everybody and welcome to Health Code, which I'm excited to say is now sponsored by this fantastic brand, Organised Nutrition. Now, I've been using Organised for about the last 18 months. I used to spend a lot of money every month on different supplements, on different protein powders, because there's so many of them out there that are full of so much toxic, unnecessary ingredients, sweeteners, sugars, E-numbers and so on, that you end up having to find them in decent places, and therefore you end up spending quite a lot. What I've been doing for the last 6 months is using Organised exclusively, not used anything else, not taken any other supplements, not been using any other proteins, and honestly, I've never felt better. I'm not just saying that, it's changed a lot for me. I have it every morning with raw milk. I don't have anything else before I have that. I make sure I have it on an empty stomach. Since then, gut issues, energy, digestion, all of which has been so much better. So if you look at the back of the pack, you'll see no unnecessary ingredients. You see nothing in there that doesn't need to be in there. All that's in there is there because it's beneficial for your health. I spoke to their founder, Niall Kiddle, last year on Health Code. We got on really, really well. And since then, I've been trying their product and I'm really happy to be partnering with them for Health Code. So if you head over to their website, you'll see the link in the description of the episode and use the code HEALTHCODE. You'll get 10% off your first order, which will come with a nice bottle and a whisk so you can make it. Like I say, I have it with raw milk. You can have it with water. You can incorporate it into smoothies, into your porridge, into cereals, into shakes and so on. Whatever you do, give it a go. It's fantastic, and I don't think that you will look back. So head over to the Organised website and use the code HEALTHCODE for 10% off. It's also worth mentioning there's an Organised app you can get on iOS and Android that's completely free. It's mainly available here in the UK at the moment, although they are expanding to other parts of the world like the USA. If you go on there and you put in your postcode, it will show you in your local area farm shops where you can get organic meats, where you can get raw milk, where you can get raw honey. It's a really great way of finding out what is available in your local area, and it's completely free. I use it and I've found 5 or 6 farm shops in my area that I didn't even know were there. So if you head over to the App Store or to Google Play Store and get that Organised app, it's absolutely fantastic. Right, let's get into tonight's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's Health Code. It's great to be back with you. I hope you've enjoyed the first 2 episodes of this brand new series. We've got a brilliant guest coming up for you tonight, but first we're going to talk about supplements. Now, supplements is a really, really fascinating one because some people literally spend thousands of pounds every single year trying to make themselves healthier by taking all these supplements that they have read and seen online are going to change the game. Well, there's a lot of inferior products out there for one. There's a lot of products out there that claim they're going to do X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of variations of the same thing, and most people don't look into that and figure out which products are actually worth taking. So take an example like vitamin D3. That's a supplement that is one of the most common ones taken. There's a lot of different variations, a lot of different strengths, a lot of different sources, and a lot of different ways to consume that. It's not just a simple blanket term, vitamin D3 is good for you and will do X, Y, and Z. So understanding where you're getting your supplements from, the companies that are making them, the ingredients that go into them, because again, that's another massive rabbit hole. The amount of unnecessary ingredients that go into these supplements, the amount of the capsules that are made of very toxic things, which do a lot of damage to your body. You need to be looking into things like that, understanding what products are good and what products are bad. And also, here's a key one, which I am very passionate about. If you don't have a map to what your body actually needs, you may end up spending hundreds of thousands of pounds that you don't need to spend just to feel exactly the same. As they used to say, you're going to be spending thousands to have expensive urine, which in a sense is pretty much what you're going to do unless you're getting the supplements that are targeting what your body is deficient in. Now, one of the brilliant ways to find out exactly what your body needs is blood work. I've done it twice. I did it a couple of years ago and I found it absolutely incredible. It gave you a real map to what your body actually needs, what you're getting from your diet, what you're not getting from your diet, what you've got too much of and what you're deficient in. And then you can tailor your supplementation routine to what your body actually needs. Back in the day before I did that, I was taking 10 to 15 supplements every single day. I was taking everything that I read, everything I saw an advert for. I thought, I'll try that. And before you know it, you're spending hundreds of pounds every single month. It wasn't sustainable. And I also didn't feel any different. So by having this blood work, it then gave me a real insight into what my body actually needs. I now take just one supplement every day, and it's Organised Nutrition, which is on the shelf behind me, which sponsors this program. I've saved hundreds and hundreds of pounds every month, and I've never felt more vibrant and strong and physically virile than I do today. Sometimes less is more. More doesn't always mean better, and I feel a lot of people are chasing this dream of feeling great without actually taking the time to figure out what it is that's going to make them feel great or make their body feel more vibrant. So blood work is a fantastic way to give yourself a starting point where you know exactly where your body is, exactly what it needs, exactly what it wants, and what it's got too much of and what it's not got enough of. You can then tailor your program to be more specific and target it, and you'll start to feel better if you do that religiously and if you listen to what your body is telling you. What you'll also find, it's certainly what I found, is when you sit down and you examine that blood work and somebody will tell you and explain to you what different things mean, you'll have them describe symptoms to you that you're actually feeling. And they don't know that. They're just describing it based on the levels that you may have of different blood markers. Based on this, you probably feel a bit tired in the morning. Well, yeah. And I found that really, really insightful as well. And then I did it again after a year of changing my diet, and all the areas that I wanted to improve had improved, and all the areas that were okay remained the same. So blood work is a really fascinating insight to really understand what your body needs and what it is deficient in. There's lots of different websites out there that you can go to try and get blood work depending where you are in the world. All I would advise is you get the one that does as many markers as possible, as many different markers as possible. When you have one done on the mainstream health system, like here in the UK on the NHS, you're limited to 10 or so markers, really just the basics. The one I did had over 100, which really gives specifics as to what is going on in different parts of the body, and I found it incredibly, incredibly helpful. Another thing that can also do is if you do that periodically, like I plan to do that every year, so I'll do it again in September this year, it gives you an early warning sign if there's any issues within your body. Quite often, if you get ill, the first time you know you're ill is when you start to have symptoms. But the symptoms are not the start of your illness. They're the start of it becoming obvious. Something's going on under the skin, something's going on behind the scenes well before symptoms begin. So blood work can act as an early warning sign as well if there's any particular problem. If you've got an elevated white blood cell count, for example, but you feel absolutely fine, that's your body telling you there's a problem somewhere. And it gives you that ability to go then and look further into that. So this is incredibly useful. I know many people will think it's extreme to go and get blood work, but what it is it's taking control of your own health. As I mentioned just then, the first time most people understand they're ill is when the symptoms begin. By the time the symptoms have begun, your body's already in a state of sickness. If you get an early warning by keeping in control of your health, by being proactive, by taking the power back away from the doctors and putting it in your own hands, then you can try and stop yourself becoming sick before any symptoms begin. That's the dream, really. You don't want to get sick and react to it. You want to stop yourself getting sick in the first place. And by taking control of your health, then you can do that. To me, this is how the healthcare system should work. You should be in seeing your doctor once a year. They should do a whole load of tests, make sure everything's okay, look at your diet, look at your exercise plan, look at your lifestyle, and send you on your way. If doctors did that every year, maybe every 6 months as you get older, people would be less sick. Instead, people won't see their doctors for years, and then they'll go and see them when they're sick. In that gap in between, they might have done everything wrong, which has led to them getting sick at the end of the road. Proactive healthcare, not reactive healthcare, is the way to really change the direction of travel in terms of global health. And we know that the systems that are there to supposedly to keep us healthy aren't going to do that, so we have to be proactive and do that for ourselves. And one of the great ways to do that is to get blood work done. What it will also do, as I've said, is it will save you hundreds, if not thousands of pounds every year on supplements, because you will know exactly what you need to take. You will almost certainly be taking a lot less than you're taking right now. And as a result, the cost of the blood work will be counteracted by the money that you will save in supplements, and you'll feel better at the end of the road. So for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. The supplement industry is full of so many inferior products. It's full of so many adverts telling you need this, that, this, that, this, that. Before you know it, you're taking vitamin D, K2, vitamin C, Shilajit, CMOS, ashwagandha, everything you can think of, and your bank balance is looking very, very low. You don't need to do that. You just need to get a map of what your body actually needs, and blood work can absolutely help you do that. Right, moving on. Tonight's guest is Nic Darke, who describes herself as a human potential coach and a political advisor and commentator. Now, those two things are very much opposites, but what she does incredibly, and we're going to get into in tonight's conversation, is bring the alternative and the mainstream very much intertwined and together so that one can be implemented within the other. It's all very well and good sitting on the alternative side, but the only way that we are going to drive this movement forward is if we get people that right now don't listen or right now think that we're talking absolute woo-woo, get them to listen and get them on board. I don't think it's ever been easier than it is right now because nobody is having a good time. It's very difficult for people to live in ignorance anymore as to the fact the world is not going in a direction that they want, especially when it comes to health. So we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about how we can implement and embody the changes that we want to see in the world and how we can bring about the inspiration to others to make those changes when it comes to our health and our lifestyle. So let's dive in. Right, Nic, thank you so much for joining me. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. And from what I've read, our audience, I think, are going to absolutely love what we're going to talk about. You know, it's so fascinating going through your website and reading about the different things that you do and the different perspectives you have on things, which I think we would align a lot on a lot of different things. So I like to take all my guests back to the beginning, what led them into the journey and led them into the space that they're working in at the moment. So for you, what was your kind of introduction to the alternative health space? How did that begin for you?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for Jaymie having me on. It's great to talk to you. And to dive straight into that, I mean, well, how does it happen for anyone? I mean, there's always some kind of itch and you either scratch it or you don't, and life will get louder and louder until you do. So I think it really came for me when I was working in the city. I was working in innovation in tech, in like software platform for innovation, SaaS platform. And I was going deeper into looking at like behavior change, because that role was basically teaching businesses how to set up and roll out innovation programs. And obviously there's the mechanisms of that and the tech to support it, but it's also largely about behavior change. And so that kind of sent me down a pathway. I was doing a lot more yoga at the time, and I actually decided to do a yoga teacher training. I loved my teacher. I would go to her classes regularly. She said she was going to run a teacher training. I was like, oh, I can do that. Full of confidence and a little bit of, for want of a better word, ego, because actually your ego is just your avatar, which is a useful tool to engage with reality, right? But like, you know, like the old school answer, maybe hubris is a better word, that I can do that. I can do that, no problem. It's another string to my bow. Great, I'll go and learn how to teach yoga. And so after having had like a number of burnouts from working in the city, my body just completely gave way during my yoga teacher training. And yoga teacher training is obviously also a huge personal introspection. You know, you're going to teach. How are you holding space for people? What is it that you're teaching them? Yoga, it's about union, aligning all aspects of self. And so there was a huge excavation process for me, because physically my body had had enough. I had spent years like repressing my emotions in business, you know, sort of being very masculine in my drive and my way of operating. And it was all just stored in the body, and it had enough, and it all came out in yoga. So that was really my full spiral, and I guess kind of big awakening. If most people have like one big one or their initial one, that was it for me.
Well, I've spoken to lots of people in the last couple of years doing this show, and for most of them, it's a personal experience like you're describing that has really led them to have such a passion for helping people, such a passion to become a healer or a speaker on whatever the subject may be. Because I don't think you can't buy personal experience. You can go to university and get all the qualifications and so on and all the paperwork, but until you've been through some kind of trauma or some kind of experience yourself, it's very difficult to put yourselves in the shoes of the person that you're trying to help. So I always personally much prefer to work with people who have been through something themselves and have come out the other side, because then they understand exactly where you are whenever you're talking about any issue that you have. Which is, I think, something that most mainstream doctors probably don't necessarily have, because they've not had to figure anything out for themselves. They've kind of gone in and been told this is how things are, and then they carry that out. So it's really, really interesting, your perspective and your introduction to it. It's probably why you're so passionate about what you're doing.
For sure. And the point you make about doctors, and like you've hit the nail on the head, it's also not just about doctors, it's the structure of society that we function in. It's about cognitive and cerebral understanding. Like, I can see the information, I cognitively understand the information, like I get it, but that's very different to knowing. You don't actually really know something until it's properly moved through the nervous system. Yeah. And you've had actually lived experience to actually embody that knowledge. That's what true wisdom is. It's embodied knowledge, because we are here as humans in our bodies, right? It's not just about the mental and the cerebral. And yeah, that lack of experience is also leading into a huge lack of connection, because it is through self that we also understand other. The Oracle of Delphi, inscribed on the temple, know thyself. Again, Matrix, know thyself. And that, in fact, even what she says in the film The Matrix is, nobody can tell you you're in love. You just know. Yep. Balls to bones. It's an embodied experience. Nobody can cognitively tell you. You can't just swallow information and know. You actually have to live it to truly understand and to embody that wisdom. And know thyself, again, as I say, it's our process of individuation of our own lived experience that helps us truly understand our relationship to other.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think the embodiment angle is a really, really interesting area for us to explore, especially with what you do, because I think you'll struggle to find many people alive, particularly in the West, who think the world's going in a good direction. I think most people now would agree that things aren't great for whatever the reason they may have that's specific to them, whether it's geopolitically, they're scared of conflicts, whether it's cost of living, whether it's their health, whatever it might be, that they can kind of get on board with the fact that things aren't going in a great direction. But taking them to that next level of embodying something to them for try and change it, that's, I think, where you meet the resistance from most people. And I think that's why a lot of people are always looking for some kind of hero, savior, whether that's royalty, religion, whether that's a political leader, to come and save the day, rather than wanting to take that responsibility themselves. With what you do, I'm assuming the type of people that you work with probably don't fall into that category. It's probably people that are ready to take responsibility, jump in. I'm assuming, I might be wrong, but...
Yeah, so that's such a fantastic point, and that's actually one of the things I'm sort of working on, writing on at the moment in the political sphere, is exactly, if we're looking for a redistribution of power, that necessarily means you have to embody your own power. In fact, I actually put a post out on X about that first thing this morning, well, sometime this morning, and the people I work with, so I have worked in politics, and obviously, you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of people seeking savior. That's a whole conversation, which we can come to. But other private clients that I work with, are absolutely determined to work on themselves. And, your first question to me is, how did I get here? And, I'm sure the same for you and anybody else watching this that's been on their own journey. It has to come through your own volition. You have to want to work on yourself. You have to want to better yourself. And it is always the situation or the case that life will give you every reason possible to distract yourself away from self, to, pour yourself into work, to pour yourself into busyness rather than beingness. And at some point, you have to make the decision to actually prioritize self, not in being selfish in the way that society would probably have you believe, but actually it's a devotional spiritual practice, because the higher you are able to show up, the better for the collective. If we all did that, all problems would go pretty quickly.
Yeah, they would. And I think also as well, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that saying on the aeroplane of put on your own mask before helping others, I think is really poignant in life. That, if you're trying to be everything to everybody and you're not taking care of yourself, then that's not going to last very long. That's not sustainable. And I think also with the way that, the way that we are, people look up to people who embody whatever it is they're talking about. So it's very easy to say something or to hear something, but to actually watch somebody living it, I think that's so much more powerful. So I always say this to people as well: is you can speak to people and inspire people without even knowing them. You walk past someone in the street, the way that you walk, the way that you're dressed, the way that you look aesthetically, the way that you're talking to your partner, the way that you're talking to your kids around the pool on holiday. Other people are seeing that. You might not even be noticing, but they're picking up on that and they're observing that, and that might inspire them to do something different with their life. So I think it's so important that we not just understand some knowledge, we embody it, we live it unapologetically, because you never know who's watching. I think that's something that's really poignant. That's certainly when I had kids, I thought about that a lot, is everyone's watching you all the time. And if you can inspire somebody to maybe be a little bit more hands-on or be a little bit more in touch and put their phone down and speak to their family, then I was much more conscious of that than I probably was before. And I think, as you're saying there, that's something that we can definitely acknowledge more, the inspiration you can have on others by just living your life yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. So perfect example with children, because monkey see, monkey do with kids. You can tell them how they have to behave, all you like, but they're just going to copy your behavior, basically. And that can be quite confronting for parents at time when they wonder why their children are doing certain things if they've told them to do something else, right? So that's a whole thing. But yeah, exactly. That's what embodiment is. It's being authentic about what you believe and what you speak, and having the courage and the confidence to display that in your everyday life. Own it. And that is your energy that you're giving off. That is your frequency. And it's such a cliche, but actions speak louder than words, because that is how you're living your life. And in terms of politics, because you talk about people wanting a savior and you talk about the people that we look up to, absolutely, that's where we're now ripe for a paradigm shift. I posted something a few weeks ago that I think we're at the age of the end of celebrity, like celebrity is dead. We're now in the age of authenticity, because people are fed up with that veneer and gloss and sort of very flimsy two-dimensional personality of a polished politician that, has nothing behind them. People talk about them as puppets because they're just regurgitating, again, information. There's no embodiment. There's no lived experience that they're displaying. And, it's a real reflection, right? What we see on the world stage is merely a reflection of our own collective self. Carl Jung used to talk about this. So we all have our own set of beliefs, fears, self-limiters, traumas, habitual behaviors, and patterns. And if we all have those individually, so does everybody else. And so then we kind of have this collective layer of trauma, collective limiting beliefs, behaviors, patterns, etc. And so if we have that individually and we have that collectively, that compounds as we go about our daily lives and plays out very visibly, very loudly on the world stage through our political leaders. And so what we're seeing on the political stage is a reflection of all of our behaviors up to date, essentially. And we can point the finger and say we're unhappy about that. We can blame those people. But we sort of contributed, we played a part in it. But also, what is the behavior that they're displaying that you don't like? Or for the ones that you look at as saviors, what is the behavior that they're displaying that you do like? Is that really true to you in terms of what you would like to embody, how you would like to live your life? Or are we still operating from dimensions of control, competition to the point of power over? And that might be fine for your side, but actually it's the behavior as a whole that's the issue. And that level of introspection, I think, is really needed from people to truly understand how they can really shift the political sphere without having to rely on saviors and the ballot box, etc.
Yeah, I completely agree with the comments about celebrity. I think that has peaked. I really do. I think that has peaked, and authenticity is definitely coming back. The social media kind of bubble where everything that was, you aspired to lived on Instagram. That was kind of the. Well, I think maybe like slightly older generations can see the difference in the world because I can remember life before Instagram. I didn't have. In high school, that wasn't there. I remember, you still spoke to people. If you liked a girl, you asked her out. You didn't have an app. Those sort of things that have changed. But for a lot of younger kids now, I think they're slowly starting to realise that actually the best things in life happen offline, and that authenticity is so important, because you can be fake for a while and get away with it, but the mask will fall eventually. And I think so many of those people that young kids and even adults looked up to and aspired to, it's slowly starting to crumble, which I only see as a positive. And I think it's the same with politics. I think there's a lot of parallels between politics and entertainment. They're all kind of all playing a role. They've got no power. It attracts quite vacuous, empty people. But I think it ties into this feeling that we have been conditioned with since we were young, that we need some kind of ruler, that we don't have the power within us. And the reason I'm asking this is from reading when you're talking about on your website about power is innate and that we all have it within us and that we all have these gifts. We're not really taught that. We're taught that pretty much we're insignificant and we need somebody much more intelligent and clever who went to Eton and Oxford to rule over us. When really that power lies within all of us, people have just been forgotten or had it programmed out of them.
100%. And it is actually your authenticity that will return you to that power. Because it is your power. What is power, right? Power is sovereignty over self. Power is your own agency. Power is your ability to create your reality. You're doing that actually all the time, but half the time you're doing it subconsciously. And so perhaps raising our levels of consciousness is that key into a higher state of power. In fact, that's what I always like to say is the real power to the people is the raising of consciousness. But you being really true with yourself, so actually sitting with your own lived experience versus what you're told, and actually feeling into that. Do I like that? Don't I like that? Why? What's coming through for me in this situation? Like genuine true introspection to be with your true self at the moment, because as you and I have both said, there's so many distractions, social media being one of them, to keep you away from that. And it is through really speaking your truth, through really actually being honest about how you feel, like having your own emotional accountability, that you can actually take any steps towards coming back to that true level of power. There is great power in authenticity, because it is only through doing that inner work of metabolizing those emotions, working through those belief sets, whether they are around the fact that you've been conditioned out of believing that you have any power. All of that is the work that needs to be done. So great power in authenticity. And to just talk to a little bit what you've said about it being conditioned out of you. I mean, where to start, really? I was thinking actually before coming on here, health code. It's like thinking about the word health, because I don't usually associate it with what I do, but obviously it's perfectly appropriate. But I was like, what's a good definition of health? So the one that kind of stuck out to me that makes sense is the overall ability for an organism to function. And what is that function for humans? What is the potential of that function for humans to be a creator, to stand in your power, to have that full sovereignty, to have your own internal locus of control and potency about how you go about your life? But then the immediate question came up is that, well, how can we have a healthy society when people's mental, emotional, and actually physical bodies are not even their own, let alone kind of having their own level of sense of power? They're manipulated so much through media, through government initiatives, or whoever's initiative it is, that hijack so many of the functions of being human. So, for example, our limbic system, gets hijacked on a regular basis, and that's where we have memory. That's where we develop our attachment at a young age, understanding basically how we respond to relational dynamics when we don't feel safe. So our limbic system is hijacked on a regular basis, putting into a state of fear, so that we then react with stress responses rather than considered conscious volition, but actually unconscious behavior patterns, which are well known by, like psychologists have done this for decades, near on like centuries now. That's what Edward Bernays did, taking ideas from Freud and pouring it into both industry and politics. But yeah, our mental, emotional, and physical bodies are just totally hijacked in this way. And to the degree where we absolutely no longer trust ourselves, our own lived experience, back to that same point, because that's what our mental, emotional, physical bodies feed us and help us to understand and process. And instead look for some great savior to come in and sort the problem out for us. That's exactly what psychological subversion is, or active measures is what the KGB would call it. And Yuri Bezmenov would talk about this a lot. If you Google him, I'm sure you'll find videos on it on YouTube and things, or whatever streaming platform you like to watch or use. And those steps are of subversion. I think there are four steps. And the first one is to demoralize. And that is basically to sever you from your mind and your heart, your ability to understand up from down, right from wrong, left from right, man from woman, and demoralize in that sense that you don't have your own inner frame of morality, and also therefore depress you because you don't have morale in that sense. And when you get to that state, it's very easy to destabilize. We create fracture in society and social contracts, so that there's always a requirement for state intervention to solve out basic things, even like interpersonal like relationships, whether it's husband and wife needing state intervention through the courts, through court orders, through child maintenance service, or whatever it is, in order just to manage a personal relationship that we hopefully should be able to ourselves, or, laws about using the wrong pronoun or whatever, that you can't process your own emotional response to someone's agreement or disagreement to you. So we have this destabilization, which also feeds into the economy and like the basics of what a government or a societal structure needs. And then we get to crisis point, and we all know like problem, crisis, solution. And so crisis point is where people, because they've lost their minds and their hearts, because they are demoralized and they are destabilized and social contracts are fractured, they can't figure it out for themselves. There's no level of community for them to work together to figure it out. And they're at such a crisis point that they then willingly ask for the fourth measure, which is more top-down centralized state control, like police state or whatever else the government's wanting to do to basically transfer of power again upwards away from you. So there is a huge, direct correlation between, our well-being, our connection to self, our own lived experience, and our power and our disbelief that we have it and that we have to give it up and have somebody else tell us what to do, that they have the power and we have to fight for it to acquire it externally rather than embody it.
Exactly. We've got it within us. We've just had it conditioned out of us that we need to fight for it back when it's still with us, and it always has been. I think what you talked about there with the ignoring what you see with your own eyes, essentially, we saw that start big time in 2020, where people were ignoring what they were seeing with their own eyes to follow the news and following arrows around the supermarkets and so on. When you went out with your own eyes and looked around, you saw no evidence of what you were seeing on the news at all. We're seeing the same now in various different parts of the world, where people are seeing things, reading things, hearing things, and then being told the opposite. And apparently that's fine. It makes me think of that, the lines from Orwell's 1984 is like, war is peace, unity and all those things, and it's very, very clear to see that they're trying to get you to ignore what you see with yourself, so you don't trust yourself, like you say, and it is demoralizing when you can see something so clearly and then you're being told you're wrong constantly, or you're being ignored and gaslit to ignore what you're seeing with your own eyes, or you're being labelled as far right or some kind of dangerous skeptic of something when it's very obvious there's a question to be asked. I can see why so many people feel like that. What do we do to try and bring those people back? The people that are ready to speak out, the people that are ready to start looking at things differently, but maybe are too scared because of the fear of the repercussions of doing so on their livelihoods or their family or their online abuse or whatever it might be. How do we get them over that threshold that they do it anyway?
Maybe, I mean, it's a journey, but in first instance, maybe two things. So one would be just to really understand that that's actually what you're here for right now. That is the spiritual dilemma, as it were. It's a bit of an intense definition, but I'm going to use it. So Caroline Myss is in the spiritual world. She looks at some archetypes and soul contracts and many things in that sort of sphere. And in looking at archetypes, she sort of created her own definition of prostitution. And she defined it as trading your spirit for material safety. And so we're in a position on a daily basis where we have the choice to trade our internal morals, our sense of spirit, our sense of self for material safety. I think like cancel culture is a really good example of that. You're being asked to shut up, to trade your truth, your sense of spirit, and to speak freely and what is in alignment and you know that is right. You're asked to trade that off so that you can stay on a platform.
Yeah.
Some transient material construct that quite frankly will come and go through the ages. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like your soul is eternal. Yeah. So like that's the spiritual trade-off. And that's what we're all being asked to attend to here and now, in my view. And that is how we overcome this, is that internal power. You can't wait for the government to give it to you. You have to embody it. So this is how we do it, is choosing our own internal moral compass. And yes, that might mean that we have short-term discomfort in the material world. But if we all did it, really, it wouldn't last very long at all. Mass non-compliance will come from spiritual awakening, everybody doing their own personal work, just meditating. Do you know what I mean? Like whatever language you want to put on it, like that will come from that. So I think just helping people understand that like that's the battle that we're all facing, like understanding the beast and putting it into context, because we get, again, so far down the rabbit hole of thinking about it in terms of numbers and livelihood and all those kind of things. And actually, like, let's put it into context and big picture and really what are we talking about here? And also how long is that discomfort going to be for? Because where one door shuts, another will always open.
Yep.
There's enough of us now having this conversation that if you lose your job at X, there will be another opportunity there for you to create and generate cash from, and money or wealth or whatever. And again, that's down to your mindset of abundance versus lack and scarcity, isn't it? Which is, again, is another buying into material lie or spiritual well source. So having that overview and then actually helping people do the work. So, like feeling the fear, which is the kind of thing that, most coaches or people will talk to you about is getting out of your own comfort zone. And actually that's what we're doing. This is just a comfort zone that loads of people haven't come across before, right? And breaking out of that. We can learn how to do a new job, or we can go and, like, if you look at like athletes, they're working on pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. And so this is another different kind of comfort zone that we're being asked to push ourselves out of. And we can all do that and use the same kind of tools in order to move us through that. And really reconciling and processing those self-limiting beliefs, those fears, those traumas, those behavior patterns, to understand how they're actually playing a role in maintaining the power dynamic that we're trying to change, and actually working through them and processing them. That's
I think
it.
one of the positives now is that the comfort zone you talk about is not that comfortable anymore for so many, so they're less resistant to some kind of change. And on that particular subject, I really love the saying that birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. If what you've always known is what you've always known, doesn't mean it's right. You know, if you were born into a lunatic asylum and somebody came in from the outside world, you'd think they were the one that was mad. And I kind of feel like we're at that point now where the lunatics really are running the asylum here. And when you talk about these kind of subjects, which would have been common discussion back not too many generations ago, when we lived much more in harmony with the world, much more in harmony with each other and in communities. Now all of a sudden you're the fringe person, you're the slightly weird one that's talking about subjects that are a little bit different versus, you know, watching 1,000 TikTok reels a night and eating a bunch of toxic rubbish and watching reality TV. That you're the normal one. And I find that such an amusing situation to observe sometimes, how quickly they've managed to shift that and get people believing that's normal and this is not. But like we said earlier on, I feel that the hard reset is coming, because it only goes so far, doesn't it? The pendulum always comes back eventually. And I think we've got to the point now where our lives have become so unnatural, whether that be the way that we live, the foods we eat, the way that we interact with fellow human beings compared to how we would have done, that it's only naturally going to come back. And I don't think we're far away from that. And I think that's very exciting. And you mentioned it then in your answer then as well. I've had 3 podcasts in the last few days, and every single guest said the same thing about people choosing to be here at this time, choosing to be part of this spiritual period now as this transformation happens, and feeling that duty that we're here to do something. We're here to work. We're not here to be, you know, sat on the sidelines. We're all here to be part of this shift, and those of us that see it, it's our responsibility to be part of bringing it in. So it's quite interesting that the fact that all 3 of you have said the same thing, which I think is really a sign that we're all on the right track here.
That's it. And I guess there's 2 things there, isn't there? Like perspective, as you say, to pull yourself out of the upside down world of thinking that, you know, consumption is a way to live, versus coming back to creating and realizing that we all create our reality. And again, it's the difference between exactly what we started the conversation with, the difference between lived experience versus swallowing information. Like, it's the same mode of consumption. You're consuming your reality versus creating your reality. And that is the spiritual path to create. That is what we're all here for, is to actually master and understand how we process energy and create realities from a higher state of consciousness, so that we can all benefit from that. And actually, the path to doing that is through your lived experience. This is what I work with people on. Actually, very specifically, if you look at how you metabolize your life experience. So like, what is your life? Your life is simply a set of experiences that you're having all the time. And that happens through a 3-stage process, essentially. You sense, so you take in information, whether that's within you, feeling, thinking, whatever, whether it's external to you, you are sensing. You are then processing what you sense, and then you are responding. It's an inflow and an outflow, essentially, if you think about external world versus internal world. That is the sum total of your lived experience, is how well you sense, how well you process, and how well you respond. And that is actually the path to your power, is to be able to have sufficiently open, to be sufficiently receptive to take in as much information, as much experience as you possibly can, and tolerate it without shying away from it, sticking your head in the sand, or, you know, whatever, to fully receive information without being overwhelmed, and to have a sufficiently clear lens through which you receive that information, so you're not all just skewing it with your own belief systems. Yeah. And then processing it from the highest vibration you possibly can, And it is through processing it that you also raise your vibration. So if you're receiving something and you feel a trigger response within you, that's a cue about you as a tuning fork, you as your vibrational frequency, you and your level of power, for you to then continue to work through and metabolize and process. In doing so, that you will work through and integrate that line item, as it were, and that will make you clearer as a channel for energy to move through with consciousness, and it will raise your vibration. So then you can then respond and conduct energy through you much more powerfully, much more potently, much more spontaneously, and with much more responsibility, rather than reacting or consuming, but actually you're responding. You have the capability to create responsibly. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, it does. I think this is fascinating subject. It's such a fascinating area because lots of people talk about the very 5 cents level of we've got to do this, we've got to get organised, we've got to organise these groups, these political parties that are going to change the day, and then you've got on the other end of the spectrum you've got a very spiritual only perspective. You very rarely see somebody do what you're doing, which kind of intertwining the two, which I think's fundamentally where we have to be. I don't think either on their own will work. So I think it's really, really interesting what you're talking about.
I'm delighted. Good.
I'm sure the audience will as well.
So, because, exactly what you're saying is correct. So we can see at the moment, an awakening. That language is a bit more prevalent now on, let's say, X, social media platforms. People are talking about the awakening masses. But those who consider themselves awakening are also quite often, I'm seeing, fueled with rage.
Yep.
And they're pointing at other people, calling them sheep, and they are so angry at the government, angry at the establishment. And I can fully understand that, because finally the veil has been removed and you're now seeing a lot more. But also, you now have to metabolize that anger. So, because otherwise you're just still feeding the situation that we're in. Like, what is it about that makes you angry? Ultimately, for ownership and for power, we all have to understand the aspect of self that we're angry with for being in this situation, how we've contributed, how we believed something that was nonsense or whatever. So, we have to work through that and actually, yes, come together, but from a higher state of consciousness, from a higher state of functioning, that we're not just still attacking what is there, because that's just feeding the beast. And in fact, like to reference, I'll have to get his name right. Is it David Hawkins? Yes. Who, scale of consciousness, vibrational frequency, scale of frequency and consciousness. And so we can all stay in anger and stay in that low vibration, or we can metabolize that and come at things from a higher vibration. And this is when I worked in politics, is exactly what I was interested in doing, is actually very much changing the political paradigm. One, to actually enable people, encourage them to stand in their power, how to do that. But also, instead of attacking the negative all the time, being focused on that and generating that anger and that rage, which fine might be a doorway to come higher up, but to actually foster the positive, to create a genuine vision for the new, because that is what's lacking in it everywhere, quite frankly. Any new political party that still thinks and says that they are, paving the way, or the anti-establishment, they're still behaving in exactly the same old way. They're still attacking the negative. And so that's my focus, is to shift that, very much so.
I think it's fascinating. You're right. Political parties that you see that are making any kind of headway, they're all coming at it from the same angle. Obviously in this country, Reform are probably the ones that people are nailing their colours to, hoping that they're going to make some kind of difference. But, you look back through all the key issues, they've been on the same page as the establishment. They behave in the same way. They do and support pretty much the same things. Their rhetoric might change slightly, but the outcome's invariably the same. An interesting thing I'd love to get your take on, to do with this whole area, is the impact that religion has. And the reason I ask is because since the alternative media really kind of exploded through the COVID period, and a lot of mainstream defectors, if you want to call them that, came in, I feel that the influence of religion within the movement particularly Christianity and Catholicism, has exploded. You see, you know, I feel like I'm one of the only ones that is not coming at it from a religious perspective. And my take on it is that if you have any belief system that you are welded to the point that you refuse to accept or even acknowledge any information that maybe disputes or conflicts with what you believe, you're never going to reach a point where you're actually awakening. You're going to get awake to a point and then you're going to stop. And I feel that this massive explosion in the religious influence with the alternative media is to kind of stop that. Is to stop people furthering that awakening journey into the more spiritual realms, into the more consciousness-based research and areas. And it just kind of, okay, I understand the government are corrupt. There's a few people behind the scenes funding this, that and the other, but that's where it ends. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So because it's just another external power source. Now, obviously, we're speaking in like broad brush terms. I'm sure there are people who come at their religion slightly differently. That's fine. But generally, organized religion, in my personal opinion, is about hierarchy, is about having an intermediary between you and God, priest or whatever, again, hierarchy. And therefore, you sort of in this position where you are slightly disconnected or very disconnected from power source, and that you are sort of asking for blessing, asking for forgiveness, asking for whatever it is that you need, rather than understanding you're an aspect of that. And yeah, people are seeking a sense of morality again. If we're in a place where there has been tremendous demoralization, people are demoralized, they look to find a set of structures, because again, when you're demoralized, you don't have your own inner frame, you need a frame. So that is the system, or if not the system, it's a religion, it's a set of principles that you can get behind or buy into that might feel right for you. And yeah, you're quite right. Like, stops you from actually making that connection of that internal power source. And I think, I mean, it's problematic for loads of reasons also, because obviously we're now in the place where we have like religious war. We have people fighting against each other because of their religion. It's like, well, hang on, what's the point in religion? Like, what are you all ultimately preaching? Isn't that like peace and love? And
exactly.
Now you're justifying that actually we can all kill each other because of our religion. So there's a sense of righteousness that comes with it, which is actually about fighting for my position, not actually seeking understanding. And to that point, well, you might say one person is right and another person is wrong. Well, then it's not about compromising, you accommodating something that's wrong. It's about you helping surface within that other person their own power and their own connection with God and their own sense of love and their own sense of peace, so that it's not that argument anymore, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's an easy way. I didn't touch on that. It's an easy way to divide and rule people. Such an easy way to divide and rule people. Pretty much every war has been fought over some kind of religious value. The entire Middle East is an insane place for so many reasons because of religion. You know, you look at the city of Jerusalem, they all fight over it, and you remove that fault line and how much more peaceful the world could potentially be. And I think what you're saying there about, if you have a belief system that you believe is the right one, and that you have this sense of superiority because I'm right, then of course you're going to belittle other people who maybe believe something slightly different. That's human nature, and that's what we're seeing a lot, isn't it? We see people literally walk the earth believing they are God's chosen people, or they are protected by a certain God or a certain belief system because somebody wrote it. No one knows who wrote it, by the way, but somebody apparently wrote it however many years ago. It's really mad when you think about it that way. When I look and think of some of the stuff we get called, and you think, I think I'm the sane one when you actually look at some of this text.
For sure. Then maybe the conversation becomes about the quest for truth, right? Yeah. Instead of I'm right, you're wrong. Well, what's the truth? And then again, we come back to actually the fundamental principle in all of this, of our whole existence, and why we have these arguments and why politics is the way it is. And back to what we're talking about our own personal power, is the difference between self and other, self and collective. It's like there's me in the world, and what is the relationship and the dynamic of that. And I have this temporal me, this immediate me, Nic, in this life experience. And then there's all this other around me. And it is through our own lived experience that we actually understand more deeply our connection to the wider whole and understand ourselves as an aspect of the wider whole. But through that process, our understanding of information, of reality, of truth expands. And what we once thought was true, we think is not. And we gather more experience and more information until we get to a state of higher understanding. And like that's exactly what's required in that situation, is to understand that we're both self, we're both temporal in a wider collective, in a wider reality, of which, how do we understand what is true? How do we find and reconcile that understanding if we're all ultimately an aspect of the same source of oneness, of God, whatever you want to call it? Like, then doesn't it make that like bickering between the two of us a little bit stupid?
It does. I always used to say, before I really got into this arena, I always used to observe the world and think it was insane then. I used to say, imagine an alien race landed on Earth and you're the person they landed and spoke to, and they said, explain human beings to us. You'd get halfway through about 2 sentences and go, we're mental. We're literally mental. Someone's got exactly the same, basically everything as me, but their skin looks different, so I don't like them. They were born in a different part of the earth to me, so I don't like them. They think something different happens when you die, so I don't like them. You would literally just be like, we are insane when you think about it, the amount of ways that we've been kept apart from each other. And the kind of overall message of the episode really has been about unity and rediscovering your own power, rediscovering your own connection with yourself. If all of those things were ticked, all those fault lines would just go. They just go instantly, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, the path to oneness is individuation, ultimately, because you can't force oneness. I mean, that's what globalism is, or that's what, like if we remove boundaries and like we pretend that there isn't a self, we just become one like homogenous blob. That's not oneness. We find oneness through individuation, through our own experience, through our own pathway. And that is what has been bastardized ultimately by the system, this sense of individuation. Either you're not allowed to individuate from the state, or your attempts to do so again are hijacked, because one of the key ways that we learn to individuate, that we understand self, is just basically going through our life and being able to meet our needs. And we can look at, I like to reference Maslow, Abraham Maslow, and the hierarchy of needs, which he created in the 40s. And that was actually a piece of work about individualization and the meeting of needs, basically. And that, though, is a hierarchy of needs. And at the base is survival state, your physical requirements to survive. And actually, instead of pushing people upward into self-actualization, society's been based around maintaining people at that survival state so they don't actually individuate. But what is moreover wild is that actually it doesn't need to work like that anyway. There's a two-way process of upward flow of energy from physical to spiritual, where we think that's how we ascend and we self-actualize. But there is also taking spiritual energy, channeling it through the body and bringing it into the world. That's what being a creator is, right? And so we've been duped in just a one flow of energy, which is physical, material world upwards, and that we have to get past that material realm of basic survival according to having enough money, a job, being able to buy food, or a roof over our head. and so people like never actually get there. So, our function as a human, our ability to try and individuate has been hijacked so that we don't. So we can't actually reach this sense of oneness and collective harmony, because if everybody was like fully self-actualized, really had worked through as many of their issues as they possibly can in this lifetime, and, we're all operating from a higher state of being, well, what a fantastic collective that would be. How much harmony would we be operating in? So yeah, that sense of self in the world, self in society, self individual and collective, absolutely is the crux of it all, but has been hijacked so that you cannot individuate, but you're sold that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this whole concept that unity means everyone has to be the same is a complete misrepresentation of it, because I think we're in the world now, people are pretty much becoming the same. They're becoming vessels of each other. Whereas if you've got a belief system that's yours and it's not so fragile that you're, offended or you're confronted by somebody having a different one, and you all just get on, that's true, unity, but through individual respect for each other's opposing views. That's my attitude towards it anyway. Believe what you like, just don't impose it on me or anybody else, and we'll get on absolutely fine. What you do in your own home, how you raise your family, how you treat your partner, that's for you and them. It's not down to me. No concern of mine. So I think, a misrepresentation of you just want everyone to be the same, that's communism, was not quite not quite at all. So just to finish up, for people that are watching that have been really fascinated by what you've said and really want to understand more about this, but don't necessarily know where to start, because on the surface it can seem, incredibly big. The goal that we're trying to achieve seems very far away from where we are sat here today. Where do you think the key areas for people to start this journey are?
That's a big question. This journey being your whole life path of basically individuating.
What shall I do first? Let's put it that way. What do I do? What shall I do first? What's the first place to look at to start the journey? Obviously, the journey is going to be a long one, but what's the best way to get your foot on the ladder, do you think?
Know thyself. Start self-mapping. Honestly, I teach meditation, so I'm biased, but really it is the doorway, because it's about self-connection and understanding self-concept and expanding sense of self. So meditation, a lot of meditation that we see at the moment actually comes from like a monastic lineage, which is very much often focused on focusing. You either pay attention to the breath or you try and clear your mind. And if thoughts and feelings come, you're told to just let them pass like clouds. So that practice is fine for you developing focus and memory recall. That's great. That has its place. Now, what over time that will do is that you will actually build a block to actually be with those thoughts and feelings that are asking for your attention in meditation. When you go into meditation, your nervous system wants to recalibrate. It wants to process. It wants to metabolize all the things that are stuck in it. That argument you had 10 years ago, what you're having for lunch tomorrow, that meeting you've got next week. It wants you ready for life, and it wants you reconciled from everything that you've experienced so that you can be the most powerful that you can be. That's what your nervous system is designed to do. That's how we become that clear channel to create. And so meditate, just instead of discipline, devotion. Devote yourself to yourself and give yourself some time to just tune in and just take an air of leisurely curiosity about what's going on in there. Get curious. If you're frustrated that you can't focus, if you're frustrated that your mind is busy, it's all your experience. That's okay. Why am I so busy? I'm not giving myself enough time to process life. All right, well, I've started now, so I'm on the journey. Okay, so there's going to be a few weeks of really processing a lot of backlog, and I'm going to really start to see some uncomfortable things that I refuse to pay attention to for a few weeks. That's fine. It's all going to come through. So just start building that self-connection. You want the clearest, most direct experience of self that you can have in life, and the matrix is anything that interrupts that connection, that experience. So that's what you want to tune into. And there are loads of ways that you can then start going about breaking down and understanding what comes through for you, whether it's just doing an inventory of your belief systems and actually, where do they come from? Do I actually believe them? Would I like a different belief? What might that be? and actually understanding that all these things are malleable, and start tuning in. Like that's the first and foremost step, I think, for anybody, for their own personal journey.
Yep, I completely agree. I always say start with, make a list of the things you want to change and start with the ones that you can change from today. So, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your kids, what you're putting in your body, you can change that starting right now through no external influence, no money, no anything. You just start that yourself. And then slowly you tick some off the list, and eventually you hit some of the bigger ones, but you've ticked a few off the list already, which is a great way to start, I think.
That's it. All of those things, they're free. Meditation is free, and it's all ultimately about how you show up. It's all you. So
100%.
Get to know you.
And that's exciting. It sounds daunting sometimes, but it's exciting. You're the one in control. You're the one in the driver's seat. And, we've just been conditioned to believe that we need others. I don't think we do at all. So for people that have been fascinated by what you've said, which I'm sure will be the vast, vast majority of people listening, where can they find more about you, get in touch with you, and listen to more of your work?
Amazing. Thank you. So just find my website, nicdarke.com. Just about to launch Substack, where I haven't written for ages, but I'm starting again now. So there's going to be a fairly meaty piece coming out soon. And probably X as well. They're probably the three best places. And yeah, I'm delighted to work with anybody that's interested in going on their own journey, and those who want to work on projects that are more focused collectively as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll put the links to that in the episode description, and I'm sure lots of people will head over and check that out. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to talk to you, Jaymie. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for tuning in with us tonight, everybody, on today's episode of Health Code. We'll be back with you again next Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, bringing you another inspirational health speaker, telling you information you won't hear anywhere else. Until then, have a fantastic week. Bye for now.